Good morning. Thank you for joining our Affordable Multifamily Retrofit series. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to enrich yourselves, right? I know everybody's super busy. We're really proud of the work that's gone into this, and first want to thank the LA Department of Water and Power for giving us a chance to share this work. And we hope that you'll find it valuable. We're going to have some polls throughout this. There will be a very brief survey at the end, but we hope that you'll come out of this with a better understanding of the process to go about retrofitting existing affordable multifamily, taking advantage of the incentives that are available, and learn from ELACC's experience. They've been at this for a couple few years now, and have generated some great learnings and materials, and all of that great stuff will be coming out soon. So we will be recording. It's already rolling. The slides will also be available. Not sure what the closed captions means, to be honest, but I think that means that you have the option to do that if that's helpful for you. And we'll be sending everything in follow-up. Quick agenda, I'll provide some background and context just to put the work in perspective and the process that we're going to talk through. We'll have a couple case studies, actually, two of them, completed projects that ELACC has done. We will provide an overview of the retrofit process, and this is not just a sales pitch, right? This is like the real deal from start to finish for everything that we wish we had known. And we'll save some time for questions. So I'll try to move through the content quickly. It is a lot. Please don't feel like you have to copy everything down or get it all on the first cut or whatever. We'll be posting all of these resources. This is very much a emergent set of best practices, and there's a community here to support. My name is Dave Hodgins. I'm the founder and CEO of Sustento Group. We lead the Retrofit.LA cohort, of which ELACC is a glowing champion. Also includes Little Tokyo Service Center and Esperanza Community Housing, who are doing incredible work as well. And Adalia Rodriguez, unfortunately, could not be here today. I think she's receiving an award of some kind for her work on this. So I'll be standing in and going through this. So background and context, why did we put this together? Why is this important? Why is this relevant? All of these issues are relevant. All of these issues are at play. And we believe that investing in existing affordable housing cuts across all these issues. But how do we do that? How do we make that opportunity accessible for folks? And that's really been the mission of the Retrofit.LA cohort. And ELACC's motivation is to pave the way, right? Pave the way for others to learn from their experience, the lumps that they've taken. Housing affordability is obviously no secret. LA is one of the, if not the most expensive city to live in the world. And our buildings are aging at the same time as the climate has changed. Extreme heat has become the top public health issue. LA County recently passed an ordinance limiting indoor temperatures to 82 degrees, which is still really hot. City of LA is thinking about similar. Meanwhile, utility bills rise, or people who have access to cooling choose not to use it, right? Because it's expensive to run, or it's inefficient, doesn't work that well. But climate change is getting worse. And so you're seeing the simultaneous infusion of incentives, right? Resources. There's ability to finance this work if the upfront cost is an issue, and we'll get into that. But how do you square all this? And so this was really the motivation for creating a field guide. And we've done that through this really project-driven, ground-up approach. So it is a best practice, step-by-step, with templates and resources, and we're going to preview some of those today. And those will come available over the coming days and weeks. This is webinar number 1 in a series of 4. And thank you again to DWP for supporting this and letting us share out this work. The next one will be after the holidays. We'll focus on financing. I'll touch on that today, but ELACC closed a pretty groundbreaking transaction that created a pool of money that they could use to pay for this work. And it's very efficient the way that it's structured. And we think it's replicable and something we'd love to share more about. So that'll be January. Webinar number 3 will focus on tenant engagement. That's a critical component. We're going to ask you a question about that as we head into this today, especially in this political environment. People are being very careful, and there's a lot of fear, and that's well founded. But this can be a really good thing for all parties, and so we want to focus on that. ELACC has done a tremendous job of engaging with their resident community. Shout out to Clarissa and Melissa for all your work there. And then, this is construction. I mean, this is a construction project. There's other work that you may have going on. Generally, we want to keep people in their units, not have to relocate folks for this work. That is possible to do, but it requires a thoughtful approach. And so we're going to dive into that. Again, lessons learned through some completed projects, and that'll be webinar number 4, as you see in next June. So to start with an example of a completed project, it's a big win. So this is Lorena Terrace. This is on Lorena Ave in Boyle Heights. As you see behind me, 6th Street Bridge. It was a LIHTC building, but they exited year 15, and so ELACC owns it outright. It's about 20 years old, which meant that the existing or the original equipment was getting towards the end of its useful life, right? Things starting to break down, repairs, maintenance was getting high. All the units are occupied, 49 units. And this project is now complete. No relocation was needed, and they did a very comprehensive scope of work. Through a collaborative effort, we were able to combine 4 different incentive programs. That's what all these acronyms are on the side here. LADWP's program is this CAMR, the CAMR program, and we're going to focus on that and suggest that that's really the sort of enabling program that funds free technical assistance for you to figure out what you would want to do, what makes sense to do, your options at your property, no cost. Again, that's provided by a nonprofit called the Association for Energy Affordability, and we work with them. They can also combine and stack these other incentives. So that's a role they play across the state, which is really great, kind of a one-stop shop for incentives. You can see the scope of work, very comprehensive. They did basically everything. And it was important as they were engaging with the tenants. The tenants said, hey, well, what about, we're talking about, heat pumps and blah, blah, blah. How about a dishwasher? And ELACC said, sure. And so these things come up, and this is something I actually highlight on this slide because it was really important. Getting people excited about the work. We also, the environment, climate can be kind of abstract for a lot of people. So what are some day-to-day priorities that they have that can be part of it? The grants and incentives were really important. Again, AEA ensures that everything was put in correctly and qualifies for the incentives. The financing will go into more depth on a future webinar, but this was a revolving credit facility at the entity level. So it was not debt to the project. So folks that are thinking about financing, oh, that's impossible on an existing affordable housing asset. It is possible. So happy to talk more about that with anyone that's interested. So this was a really a first of its kind. So we're really proud of the result here, and we'll highlight project number 2, which was financed through the same credit facility here in a few slides. But just it's cool to see these examples. There are others that have come through the program as well. but this is one that's in our neighborhood in CD14. Um, so this is a flow chart, and this is may look like a lot, but we think that having it broken out this way, and if we follow this process and take advantage of the resources that the Retrofit.LA cohort has collectively developed through the course of doing their projects, and again, that's ELACC, Little Tokyo Service Center, and Esperanza Community Housing, putting their heads together, what's worked for them, and then sharing it out through this process. And so these are the steps. These are the steps that we've come up with. Getting started, super important. Funding your project all the way through managing an O&M. One thing I would point out, a couple of things I would point out, things may look sort of out of a traditional order. That's actually on purpose. These are lessons learned. So funding the project is very important to think about early on, because the incentives, before you even spend a lot of time on this, because it's work, right? To develop a scope of work, then to go through procurement. You only want to do that if you've got a clear strategy to fund the work. The incentives are great. They are great. They can cover a very significant, 50% to even up to 100% of the project costs, but they're paid after the work is done. And so having those conversations up front about, are we open to financing? Could we qualify? Exploring all of this up front, looking at the whole portfolio, we think it's worth doing that. And there's a lot in the getting started. So I'll go through this today. Again, future webinars will deeper dive on the financing piece, tenant engagement, and construction, because those felt like, to us, from our cohort's experience, the ones that were really deserved their own webinars. But we'll have resources for each step. So I think this is a poll where we ask which of these phases seems most interesting or challenging, or what are you most wanting to learn about today? So we'll just give this, don't overthink it. We'll take 10 seconds here. All right. Let me close the poll. And then I think we can share the results. A lot of funding, reviewing the portfolio, selecting properties. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for this. I'm going to say underrated on this list is the getting started part, but I'm glad to hear that you don't feel sheepish about getting started. That's excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. Um, so getting started, I know this isn't what everyone said they were most thinking about, but I will just touch on this. And I think hopefully there'll be some ideas that come out of this that are valuable for you. Thinking about the team structure, retrofitting existing buildings is not necessarily a skill set that affordable housing providers have internally, right? You've got development team, but they're focused on new construction. You've got property management, asset management. This kind of falls somewhere in between. So really, you're going to probably want to tap into skill sets and ideas from all of those groups. There will be a lot of decisions that need to be made, financial decisions, as well as decisions that impact tenants, as well as the ongoing operations and maintenance of the buildings. So this really does cut across all of those groups, and including, if you've got board decision making, executive leadership, that they be aware of the work, and understand where do they come in, what are the decision points, and we hope that this field guide that we're putting out can be helpful in grounding those conversations. Time commitment, thinking about this and what's realistic. How many projects can you take on at once as an organization? Do you have internal construction management, or at least project management expertise? External partners, I mentioned AEA. They're the program implementer for LADWP's incentive program. They're fantastic. And so you can count on them for project scoping to help you with selecting contractors, things like this. But they can't do it for you, right? So it's going to take the right individual or team of individuals on your end to interact with them and interact with the contractors and to move paperwork and data from A to B. I think it's part of this stage to also gather your drawings if you have them, as well as other documentation about affordability covenants, all that kind of good stuff. Utility data, where are your meters, like, and what we found is that it's a healthy exercise to go through, and something that, at least for our cohort members, was something they'd been meaning to get to. They didn't necessarily have all of this stuff super organized the way that they wanted it, and so we kind of got into that as we went here. But think that a better practice would be to do some of that up front, just getting all your ducks in a row, and making sure that you've paved the way internal to your organization, that you're not going to hit snags down the road that can derail things. So very important. Um, Thinking about funding strategies. So you can expect to spend on the order of about $20,000 a door to do projects like the ones I'm showing you today, like comprehensive. And think of this as like MEP upgrades, or mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrades. It could be more, it could be less, but that's a good rule of thumb. And so do you have reserves for that? Because the incentives are paid on the back end once the project is done and everything is closed out. There's some paperwork, so that takes a little time, and so I like to be upfront about that. Um, there's been movement opening up, LIHTC and other low cost funds. So what's the strategy and the timeline? And I'll get into the sort of portfolio snapshotting, I think, in a slide or two. Um, but thinking about, if this is our rough budget, you can know before you lift a finger that this is roughly what it could look like. So how would we go about that? There are financing options. That's kind of a new thing, right? But CDFIs have geared up to do this. So probably some of your existing lender relationships now have green retrofit loan products, and your contractors may be able to float the incentives and essentially use that so they can bring financing and you don't have to come out of pocket up front. That's a great option if your contractor can do that. Not all of them can. So again, important to think about this up front. If you've got, some assets in mind, we'll get to that. You could kind of plan on this 20K per unit. A lot of that coming, 30 to 80% or so in incentives. That's what cost coverage means here on this slide. Um, and what else would I highlight here? Insurability. I just want to say something about this really quickly. I know, insurance costs have gone bonkers in the last year or two, and there's a lot of insurers paying attention to this because this is physical risk management. This is quality asset and extending the life of assets. So we hope, and I'm optimistic, that doing this type of work could also result in better insurance premiums. But that's a sort of an emergent conversation. So I just want to highlight that because it is relevant. I know it's on people's minds. Lorena Terrace, I showed earlier, that was a 2006 construction, 49 units, LIHTC. It was a bigger building. Here's a very different look, and this may look more like buildings that you're thinking about. I don't know. But this was a naturally occurring affordable housing, meaning that it did not have an affordability covenant when ELACC bought it. It's over 100 years old and smaller, 17 units in two buildings and basically fully occupied. They have been successful in fully electrifying this building, and that required some infrastructure upgrades as well, which needed to be done because the building was so old that it was already out of compliance with code. And so that was some extra cost there. My mouse is a little touchy here. Um, but very comprehensive scope of work. You see the electrical panel and service upgrades. Financed through the same revolving credit facility as the first project. So this is a dedicated revolving pool of capital that ELACC can use to fund its projects. And then you see the stack of incentives there. As those come in, they go back to replenish that revolving capital source, and they can be on to the next project. And those next projects are in development now and taking some of the lessons learned from this field guide and applying them. So we like to show some examples. So third step, after you've done, some socialization, some planning, how much time, how much capacity do we have? What would be our decision process? How would we go about funding this? Then to look at the whole portfolio in a strategic way and create a snapshot. How does this was also a really helpful effort that a lot of our cohort members had wanted to do. And our collaboration together helped to sort of bring that into focus. But looking at all the different factors that might come into play. The specific tenant populations and affordability levels can impact which incentive programs you're eligible for. For LADWP's program, 2/3 of the units have to be at 80% AMI or below. So 2/3 of the units at 80% AMI or below for CAMR. Some of the other programs are similar to that, and I don't know them as well off the top of my head. But that's one of the reasons why that's important. And when you apply, they're going to want to see that documentation. So back to the previous step, why it's good to have all this together so you don't lose steam once you start going. Property information, you're going to need all that for the different incentive program applications. And then to look at, what's the financial situation with each asset and the portfolio overall? What's driving that? Are there other rehab needs? Are you planning to recapitalize or exit or like what's the strategy with each asset? Um, and and when we say financial relationships, like I said, there's a lot of CDFIs and other community lenders, maybe some that you work with already and like and have a business relationship with, who could finance this work for you if that's something that you need. So to look at all of that in a spreadsheet, and we will give you a spreadsheet that you can use for this, can be helpful. And then you may say, well, there's some overriding reason or an emergency or another factor that just puts a property to the top of the list. Of course, right? There will be those specific factors that can impact which properties you choose first. But taking this approach, comprehensive view, we think is a good idea. I think I've already touched on most of these. For buildings over 20,000 square feet, there is an existing buildings energy and water efficiency ordinance in the city of LA, and multifamily buildings are subject to that. So there's annual benchmarking, and then there's actually other performance targets that go on a 5-year cycle. So that can be another consideration. How does this overlay, again, with other factors that may be driving your thinking about what assets in what order? So putting that all in a spreadsheet, and we can help to ideate together through how to interpret that. That's part of what we can help with, and there's no fee for that. So then, selecting properties, once you've got all this stuff together, you have your paperwork together, you've got buy-in at the organization. So which assets are you going to pick to address first? I already talked about, obviously, urgency. You may have considerations around property management, sort of skill sets at the building. What are the opportunities? and what's going to be the impact for the organization. Also, learning opportunities. Where are we going to learn? Like you saw that ELAC selected a larger building that was relatively new, and then contrast that with a smaller building, and then that was a LIHTC building. Then we had a smaller building, which was old, 100+ years old, smaller, non-LIHTC building. And we learned different things from each of those. And that was how they approached it. There's no right or wrong answer about what you want to learn, right? What would be valuable to your organization, but thinking about that can be a good layer. I do see some chats coming through. I'm not able to look at those while I'm presenting, but my colleague Danny will read those out at the end, and we'll make sure that we address everything. So please keep putting those in, and I'll try to wrap up in the next 20 minutes and leave us some time for Q&A. Tenant engagement. First, I think we have a poll on this. Yeah. Tenant engagement is key. So just real quick answer, do you think your tenants would be on board with this, open to the work, concerned? I don't think we have a third option, but yeah, just quick gut check. You think your tenants would be open to this kind of work or would have some concerns? This also helps us think about what to cover in the tenant engagement webinar that we have planned for next year, and in the resources we're putting together. Okay, this was a short one. Let's close it. Great. Cool. Good to see people are open to it. Yeah, and stuff may come up, like on the Lorena Terrace project said, how about a dishwasher? And ELAC was able to say yes to that. But yeah, communication throughout. So some key topics, right? Like here's the kinds of things we're planning to do. Here's how that can benefit you. I think focusing focusing on new appliances, new that are quieter, that are more efficient, are good selling points. Heat pumps do work differently than gas-fired water heaters or maybe the cooling systems that they may be used to. So just to assure them that this is not, and none of this stuff is really new, to be honest. I mean, heat pumps, we're talking about them a lot more now than we had been 5 years ago, but they've been around for a long time, since the 70s. It's not a new concept. Our refrigerator is a heat pump. And we don't really think of it that way, but it's true. It's using a refrigerant to suck heat out and expel it. That's why you have that heat exhaust coming out of a refrigerator. That's basically what a heat pump does. So just explaining it to people. We've got materials that you're welcome to use. There's lots of organizations producing stuff, but we have some as part of this field guide. Being in communication about timelines, um, you can count on, we'll call it, I said $20,000 a door, and call it a year and a half or so development and construction timeline. There's a lot of planning. There's lead time on equipment. There's lots of decisions, right, that have to be made. 2 years wouldn't be crazy. And so construction might go fast, but all of the work leading up to that does take time, putting all the pieces together. So communicating with people, hey, this isn't going to happen tomorrow, right? But timing those conversations, um, going back to the prep work, thinking about how does that tenant engagement happen? Do you have regular, resident community meetings? What are like ways to make it fun? ELAC has done provides food and is doing like induction cooking demonstrations, which and tours of the properties. So if anyone's interested in that, you want to go eat some awesome food cooked on a nice clean electric stove. It's fun ideas like that. And then another thing that we learned was that if people don't understand or like the equipment that's going in, they either won't use it properly or they can take it out. For example, a common one is faucet aerators or some of the water efficiency stuff. People are like, I just don't like this, or shower heads. So you can give them some options. There are options that are available that you can get get the incentives. They're going to save you a bunch of water, um, but they have a different sort of look and feel, and you can give tenants some choice in that, and they really appreciate that. Um, is there an opportunity to bundle this with other projects that you may have been planning? Can you bundle this with? I know a lot of folks are applying for ULA funds. I appreciate you guys making time to be here today. How can this be combined with other rehab work that you're doing? Taking advantage of the fact that you're doing construction, you're in units, trying to make this as non-disruptive as possible. Um, but being in communication, there are inspections that happen before, during, after, and so being prepared for that, helping tenants understand what it's for, and having a process in place for that communication is highly recommended. So only now, 6 steps in, are we getting to developing a scope of work. And for the CAMR program, that's the Comprehensive Affordable Multifamily Retrofit Program. That's DWP's incentive program. Um, this group, the Association for Energy Affordability, AEA, they will come out and do a site visit, and they'll talk with you. They'll gather information, again, drawings, and they'll develop scope of work, and they'll give you options, and they'll calculate the incentives and all of that good stuff. But there is paperwork that's required before they can do that. And so that's why having all of your, again, documentation and data together up front is important. A lot of people want to go, hey, I want a site visit tomorrow. That's not how the process works. We have to provide some information first, and then they can schedule those site visits. But there's a lot of good prep you can do to make sure that those site visits go really smoothly and can plan ahead to the next stage. Um, Electrical capacity is an important thing to think about. If you got older buildings, the electrical infrastructure is built to whatever the code was at the time. And if you've got a very old building like Vallejo and you're trying to put in new electric appliances, you may need to look at upgrades. And you may decide, hey, I don't want to do that. I only want to do the upgrades, the measures, they call them, that don't require me to do that infrastructure work. Perfectly fine. Good to know this early in the process, though. ELACC had a bit of sticker shock when they went into this and found that they would have had to upgrade the electrical at Lorena Terrace to support, it was the induction stoves in that case. There are new induction stoves now that are lower power draw. At that time, those weren't available yet. So you want to know that up front, and that can be quite expensive. There may be good reasons to do it. If a building just needs that infrastructure upgrade to get to code and you're planning other stuff, there could be good reasons to do it. But you want to know that early on. So as you're defining the scope, you want to tailor that based on the available power, right? Are you wanting to do solar? What kind of shape is the roof in, right? So we want to know, what is your infrastructure situation, and how is that going to impact what makes sense to do operationally, financially, as you get into the project scoping. Once you have a scope of work, you can go out to bid and select a contractor. You might have folks you've worked with. You might need recommendations. I think we have a question, a poll here. Do you have contractors that you work with, or would you like to have like a directory of local contractors that are familiar with this work and do this? Or are you good? If you're good, you could say no. If you would like to have some options, you could say yes here. This is something we're thinking of doing. All right, we can close it. Cool. Great. Well, as I said, we thought it was a good idea, and it sounds like you think it's a good idea. So we are moving forward with that. That will be posted as part of our resource set here as we have it. So we hope we'll stay in touch as things come online. We will also share, if it's of interest for you, a template RFP. A best practice here, and you may have your own, right? You probably do. A best practice here is to work with AEA. Again, that's the incentive program guys, and they will make sure that all of the equipment specifications are very clear, and that all of those requirements are there. There are some contractor labor requirements on jobs of a certain size, so we want to make sure that those are in there. Um, Basically has to do with prevailing wage on larger jobs that have a big electrical component. Um, so making sure that that's all clear in there. Then they can help you to level bids, support the contractor directly with selecting equipment, making sure that the constructability is all there, um, and then putting together a really clear phasing schedule. Working in existing buildings, just requires a little extra planning. Where are we going to stage the equipment? How many units are we going to address per week or per month? In what order? Can we take advantage of any, a vacant unit, right? Like how are we actually going to execute this on a site by site basis? And then matching up that construction draw schedule against the incentives. Certain of the incentives allow progress payments, but generally speaking, they're paid after the fact. So again, I keep going back to this point, but if you're going to need a source of capital for the upfront costs, better to address that before you get to this stage, either with your contractor or with one of your existing lenders. But there are options available, and you can have that lined up so that when you get to this place, it's like, okay, here, we talked about this. We said it was going to be roughly this. Here's what we specifically want to do at these assets. Um, can we put some financing in place? I think I've talked a lot about this, but we can assist in connecting to CDFIs that want to finance these types of projects. We're doing a pilot right now. FTA is our financing technical assistance with DWP. We've got interest from some really good lenders like Enterprise and LISC and LIF and Raza and others. And so we can help to get you term sheets essentially, no fee, no obligation. You can look if nothing is going to make sense for you, no obligation to proceed. So we're just again trying to make this accessible for folks, and you guys confirmed, that access to capital is a barrier in some cases. So this is the stage, though, in this process where you would actually be applying for financing. You've already done some diligence on that. Once the financing is in place, we get into construction. So ordering equipment, construction schedules always change. And so this goes back to tenant engagement is really sprinkled throughout this whole thing. So communicating with tenants, things change. Inspections, I already touched on. Know that there will be inspections from building and safety, also from DWP incentive programs. And so be aware of that, and have a system like a tracker for what's happening on what day. And like we said back in the earlier one of the earlier slides, just have a process in place for communicating with tenants. And I find that people are more receptive to changes if they know that changes might be coming. And so sometimes people peg to a schedule or a number, and they're like, "Hey, you said it was going to be Tuesday," but if you say up front, right, like this is what we're targeting. It may be before or later. Like we'll be in communication, then that can help. I don't mean to sound like I'm stating the obvious, or if you already know, but this is just I'm just saying it because it's something that came up in our projects, and I think that they did a good job of it. But something that, again, knowing up front that this is all going to be a pretty fluid situation as it goes, being ready to communicate that, being upfront, good policy. After the construction is complete, QA is quality assurance. So, all of these funders are basically giving out taxpayer money. So they want to be sure that the equipment that was specified was actually installed, that it was installed properly and working. And so again, that you've got all your permits are closed, that there's training is in place. The training part's not part of the incentives per se, but it's something we flagged again early on. This property management needs to understand, and facilities maintenance, what are we putting in? How does it operate? Tenants need to be educated on how to use the stuff so that they're not using it incorrectly, or that they know when to ask for service. Heat pumps are like super quiet. I'm like, is this thing on? Right. It's like stuff like that. Um, and then there are inspections, right, to close those out. And you want to make sure all of this is done cleanly so you get the incentives paid as quickly as possible. Um, Before and after, it's a good idea to monitor what's happening with your utilities. If you're going from, if you're electrifying totally away from gas, then your gas bill goes away, right? Electricity use may go up. The new units are very efficient. So again, that's a point about the training. Um, there will be modeling done up front that helps, and that's how the incentives, generally speaking, are calculated, is off of GHG savings. Some of them are calculated on energy savings. That's all sort of behind the scenes for you. So, but what is in front of the scenes is to make sure that you're monitoring what's happening before and after. Um, I think I've said enough about operations and maintenance, so I'm going to move to wrap up here and have time for some Q&A. I saw some coming through in the chat, so Danny, if you could read those, I will do my best to answer them.
Uh, those were internal chats, so now we can open it up for Q&A.
Oh, great. Okay. So what would be your instructions to anyone that has a question? Should they type it in the chat, or is there a Q&A function?
Yeah, so below they'll see a Q&A, like a tab. They can click on that. They can enter their question there. They can also make it anonymous if they would like.
Right. Well, thank you. I hope that this was informative. Appreciate your engagement and making time today. Please do look out for a follow-up from us, and we're happy to have individual follow-up meetings, anyone that's interested. And yeah, please let us know how we did, and stay tuned for webinars 2, 3, and 4. Do we have a question coming in, or should I conclude?
No questions. You can conclude.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time and look forward to your feedback.